Hello everybody, welcome back to Art Science Wonder. We are going to be doing a video series that's going to be strictly science news. So it's going to be fairly recent science news. Sometimes it'll be science news of the day or the month, or something related that is fairly recent. So we have another channel that this eventually will be on as Radical Science News. For now, I'm going to keep it on Art Science Wonder, but in further iterations, it will be on our Radical Science News YouTube channel. So please make sure to subscribe if you like this video. So we're going to be doing a few topics today, primarily air pollution, and histamines, and cancer. So those three topics in that order. So first we're going to talk about air pollution, and throughout these type of video series I will be giving my commentary on these topics. At least every once in a while I will interject and give my own insight. So let's begin. Some of the effects of air pollution on health are well documented: lung cancer, stroke, respiratory diseases, and a long etc. But for others, there is less scientific evidence. Such is the case of bone health. There are only a few studies and results are inconclusive. Now, a study in India led by Barcelona Institute for Global Health, IS Global, an institution supported by La Caxia, I hope I pronounced it right, has found an association between exposure to air pollution and poor bone health. So I heard a little bit about this on the radio this week, and it's why I decided to pull this up. And because it's fairly recent, it was released dated January 3rd of this year. And I already have quite a lot of concern with air pollution because as we are all subject to it when we drive in cities, we're breathing it in. And many people don't know that or haven't put the dots together that air pollution is neurotoxic. So one way you can come to that conclusion is by some people unfortunately commit suicide by exposing themselves to excessive carbon monoxide. So which is like, carbon monoxide, which is released from the tailpipe of vehicles or your own vehicle. So obviously it's neurotoxic. It can kill you. It's very bad for you. We're breathing it in every day. And so thus we must be aware of it. So, and hearing that it could affect our bone health as well was, very, alarming to me. But anyway, we'll continue and read the article. Osteoporosis is a disease in which the density and quality of the bone is reduced. Globally, it is responsible for a substantial burden of diseases, and its prevalence is expected to increase due to aging of the population. Okay, so we are globally trending towards aging. Look up silver tsunami, and you'll be able to find a lot of information about that. So the new study performed by the CHI project, led by IS Global and published in JAMA Network Open, analyzed the association between air pollution and bone health in over 3,700 people from 28 villages outside of the city of Hyderabad in southern India. The authors used a locally developed model to estimate outdoor exposure at residents to air pollution by fine particulate matter. So, in other words, suspended particles with a diameter of 2.5. I don't know why that has a comment or a question mark there, or less. I'm guessing they meant microns, and black carbon. The participants also filled a questionnaire on the type of fuel used for cooking. The authors linked this information with bone health assessed using a special type of radiography that measures bone density called dual energy X-ray absorption absorptometry and measured bone mass at the lumbar spine and the left hip. So the results showed that exposure to ambient air pollution, particularly to fine particles, was associated with lower levels of bone mass. No correlation was found with use of biomass fuel for cooking. So, this study contributes to the limited and inconclusive literature on air pollution and bone health, explains Ottavio T. Ranzani, ISB Global researcher and first author of the study. Regarding the possible mechanisms underlying this association, he says inhalation of polluting particles could lead to bone mass loss through the oxidative stress and inflammation caused by air pollution. Annual average exposure to ambient parts per million of 2.5 was 32.8 grams per, I think they meant micron squared, far above the maximum levels recommended by the World Health Organization. 10 grams per micron squared is 58% of participants use biomass fuel for cooking. Our findings add to a growing body of evidence that indicates that particulate air pollution is relevant for bone health across a wide range of area pollution levels, including levels found in high-income and low- and medium-income countries, says Catherine Tone, coordinator of the study and of the CHAI project. Okay, so this leads to another article that was more recent, January 27th, 2020. Air pollution impacts can be heart-stopping study. So here's a picture, a red-looking sun viewed from the Nepean Hospital. There is an increased risk of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, OHCAs, even from short-term exposure to low concentrations of fine particulate matter, parts per million 2.5, and international study was found noting an association with gaseous pollutants such as those from coal burning, mining bushfires, and motor vehicles. So, coal mining as well. The nationwide study of data from Japan, chosen for its superior monitoring, population density, and relative air quality, is believed to be by far the largest of its kind. It provides comprehensive evidence of the relationship between the 2.5 parts per million and cardiac arrest, using a sample 3 times larger than all previous research combined and demonstrating the impacts on groups such as the elderly. The study, led by the University of Sydney, concludes that worldwide standards should be tightened. The implications also point for the need for cleaner energy sources. The findings published today at the high-impact journal, The Lancet Planetary Health, the corresponding and senior author from the University of Sydney School of Medicine, Professor Kazuaki Negishi, said previous research into air pollution and acute cardiac events had been inconsistent, especially at air concentrations that met or bettered the World Health Organization's or the WHO guidelines. Inconsistencies in previous data were addressed through the size and robustness of this study, which found that more than 90% of OHCAs occurred at 25 parts per million levels lower than the WHO guideline and Australian standard level, a daily average of 25 micrograms per cubic meter. This is a little bit hard to... micrograms. Okay, see there, that was what it was supposed to say, is micrograms per cubic meter. Okay, so as well, 98% of OHCAs happened at levels lower than the Japanese or American daily standard level of 25, and then again, micrograms per cubic meter. Out of hospital cardiac arrest is a major medical emergency, with less than one in 10 people worldwide surviving these events, and there has been increasing evidence of association with the more acute air pollution or fine particulate matter, such as the 2.5 parts per million, said Professor Negishi, a cardiologist and head of medicine and Nepean Clinical School at the Facility of Medicine and Health. We analyzed almost 250,000 cases of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and found a clear link with acute air pollution levels. Our study supports recent evidence that there is no safe level of air pollution, finding an increased risk of cardiac arrest despite air quality generally meeting the standards. Okay, so if air quality is meeting the standards of the WHO, but yet, or if the World Health Organization, and it's still causing all of these life-threatening side effects or health risks, that's definitely something to be concerned about. So given the fact that there is a tendency towards worsening air pollution from increased numbers of cars as well as disasters such as brush fires, the impacts on cardiovascular events, in addition to respiratory disease and lung cancer, must be taken into account in healthcare responses. Professor Negishi, who previously conducted fieldwork after the 2014 massive Hazelwood coal mine fire in Victoria, said that where cardiovascular impacts were concerned, those generally at risk were the elderly. If you're young and healthy, there should be no immediate risk of devastating consequence. However, he highlights these findings are only in relation to the short term and that the effects can last for up to 5 years. Okay, so guys, if this is harming our brains through neurotoxicity, it's lessening our bone density, and possibly causing these cardiac issues, we're looking at a pretty serious health concern or possibly crisis in the future. I don't know. But to me, it's very concerning. So the paper concludes that there is an urgent need to improve air quality. As no boundary exists in air quality among countries, a global approach to tackle this critical health issue is necessary for our planet, the authors said. Research key findings and what it means. The study drew upon data from Japan because the country keeps comprehensive records of its air pollution levels as well as a high-quality nationwide repository of OHCA. The researchers found a 1 to 4% increased risk associated with every 10 micrograms per cubic meter increase in parts per million of 2.5. Put another way, Sydney has recently been experiencing increased air pollution because of brush fire smoke, and on its worst day, 2.5 parts per million surpassed the standard of 25 micrograms per cubic meter. To jump to more than 500 micrograms of cubic meter in the suburb of Richmond, comparable to levels of continuous cigarette smoking. Oh my God, guys. That is a crazy statistic. Anyway, the increased air pollution for Sydney would translate to about doubling of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests. The Lancet Planetary Health paper compared OHCA that occurred up to 3 days after the air pollution recorded. However, the effects on the heart can occur up to 5 to 7 days after acute air pollution. Professor Negishi says, so the entire cardiovascular impacts could be worse than indicated. Also analyzed were the impacts regarding sex and age. So I guess here's a picture of the Blue Mountains disappearing into smoke before and during the Sydney brush fire. So although the impacts did not divide along gender lines for people aged over 65, 2.5 parts per million exposure was significantly associated with incidence of all-cause OHCA. So the data revealed an association between short-term exposure to carbon monoxide photochemical oxidants, and sulfur dioxide, and all cause OHCA, but not with nitrogen dioxide. Professor Negishi explains that it was likely that the levels of nitrogen dioxide, for example, from car emissions, were not high enough to result. Oh, okay, interesting. Oh, okay, nitrogen dioxide from car emissions. Okay, maybe I was wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure carbon dioxide was also from cars. I don't know. I have to look that up. Anyway, adding to known impacts of air pollution on cardiovascular mortality, generally, this study plugs important gaps in knowledge about the effects of short-term exposure to acute air pollution on OHCA. So the authors say, combined with air quality forecasts, our results can be used to predict this emergency condition and to allocate our resources more efficiently. Okay, so that was the conclusion of that paper. So obviously we need to move to, greener sources of energy. We need to try and reduce these pollutants, the various pollutants from all of these industries, and types of combustion. But it seems like the more organic they are, the less harmful overall. So that's our conclusion on the air pollution. So the next is going to be, we're going to talk about histamines. So talking about heart damage, or speaking of heart damage, we should learn more about histamines because this was released very recently. Yesterday, January 27th, 2020. So histamine, an unexpected defender against heart and kidney damage. Chronic kidney disease, here we go. Oh yeah, chronic kidney disease and heart failure are critical medical problems worldwide and are closely associated in a phenomenon known as cardiorenal syndrome. This relationship between kidney dysfunction and the heart dysfunction is complex. Many studies have attempted to understand this relationship. Few have provided a clear target for treatment of the combined dysfunction until now. In a new study published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, a University of, I think that's pronounced Tsukuba, research team investigated the levels of histamine, an important factor of inflammation in mice with cardiorenal damage, and found that histamine was increased in the blood of these mice compared with normal mice. Sorry, I need some water. Really need that. Okay, sorry. Heart failure is a condition in which the heart cannot pump sufficient blood to meet the body's needs, which is often demonstrated by shortness of breath, excessive fatigue, and leg swelling. Chronic kidney disease involves gradual loss of kidney function, frequently characterized by leg swelling, fatigue, vomiting, loss of appetite, and confusion. Despite many efforts to control these two disorders, treatments for both largely involved modifications of blood vessels to mitigate their effects, rather than curative approaches to reduce the underlying disease process. So, again, we're looking at, are we treating the symptoms or are we treating the illness? And, of course, we ideally want to treat the illness and not the symptoms in good medicine. So, histamine is an important factor in various inflammatory processes, and its inhibition generally leads to better disease control, says Akiyoshi Fukamizu, a corresponding author on the study. We found elevated levels of histamine in a mouse model of cardiorenal syndrome, which were surprisingly protective against further damage in these mice. Interesting, right? So found elevated levels of histamine in a mouse model that had better protective defenses. So in this study, mice that could not produce histamine showed worse cardiorenal damage effects, including increased heart size, altered cardiac contractility, and poor urinary filtration. Similar effects were observed when a specific histamine receptor H3 antagonist was administered to mice with cardiorenal damage, suggesting that this receptor may serve as a useful drug target. Interesting. Receptor H3 antagonist. So we found that targeting the H3 histamine receptor with an agonist, imethridine, could markedly alleviate some components of cardiorenal damage in our mouse model, says Dr. Fukumizu. Additionally, imethridine treatment led to protective changes in gene expression that affected multiple genes linked to inflammation in these mice. Of course, inflammation is a huge thing in medicine. It's many times the root or cause sometimes of many diseases is chronic inflammation or inflammation in specific tissues. So in addition to their finding that histamine can control the severity of cardiorenal syndrome in a mouse model, the researchers showed that activation of a specific histamine receptor could alleviate signs of cardiorenal damage in these mice, providing a new potential treatment for patients with heart failure and patients with chronic kidney disease. So, I forgot to explain to people who may not know what a histamine technically is. But it's basically part of the body's defense system, and it's why when or if you've ever had allergies in your life, you take an antihistamine, because your histamines are overreacting to a pollen or a food or something, anything that you can in the world that you can be allergic to. A lot of it, many times, it will be involved with your histamines. But there's a very interesting video that I found that I'm going to link in the description below as well, because histamines also happen to have a very interesting relationship with B cells. So B cells are these cells that kind of put out these markers that tell the histamines to attack a certain foreign body or organism in your body, to simplify it. And so B cells are very interesting because I think because they could also potentially be a solution at times for maybe particular types of cancer, because they work differently from your T cells, and getting your B cells to recognize a foreign body could also be very helpful, because then they can send out messengers to your histamines to attack those cancer cells or whatever it be that's ailing you. So I wanted to pull up an NCBI article that said the B side of cancer immunity, the underrated tune. And I'll just read this little abstract here because, of course, as NCBI, this is very, very in-depth many of the time. I like to read these. I still don't always understand them completely, especially if they're not in my specific area or biology that I'm interested or field, because most of these people are very, 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 very well versed in this one tiny niche of biology, and so they really know every little detail of every interaction and everything. And anyway, so I'll read this. So tumor infiltrating lymphocytes are known to be critical in controlling tumor progression. While the role of T lymphocytes has been extensively studied, the function of B cells in this context is still ill-defined. So we really don't know enough yet about this. And then in this review, we propose to explore the role of B cells in tumor immunity. First of all, we define their dual role in promoting and inhibiting cancer progression depending on their phenotype. So to continue, we describe the influence of different tumor microenvironment factors such as hypoxia on B cells, functions, and differentiation. Finally, the role of B cells in response to therapy and as a potential target is examined. Okay, so in this paper, they talk about it, how they tried to use or looked at the potential of targeting cancer. So in accordance with the importance of the B cells in immuno-oncology, we conclude, so oncology is like the study of cancer, in case you didn't know, the field or the scientific field of cancer study. So we conclude that more studies are required to throw light on the precise role of B cells in the tumor microenvironment in order to have better understanding of their functions and to design new strategies that effectively target these cells with immunotherapy. So immunotherapy has been one of the more hopeful ways of tackling cancer and in the recent years. And there's good reason for that. So it's basically using your body's own defense system to try and recognize that cancer. And this was pretty recent, I'm pretty sure. These two published 2019. So May 13, 2019. So this is all very recent cancer study stuff, in case you're wondering. Very, very recent in terms of oncology. So, immunotherapy fact of the day, number 9. B cells can create trillions of unique antibodies that provide precision targeting. This is from the Cancer Research Institute. B cells can create, okay, I just read that. And so, it says, as we mentioned earlier, the immune system uses, this is continuing from a related article. See, they have all these. This is a very interesting website, cancerresearch.org. They kind of order it in a different way. But I'll read this a little bit to you. As we mentioned earlier, the immune system uses the MHC antigen system to target tumors. And that's a very complicated system. Like, I don't even want to get into that. I tried to do some research in that, but that's not my field. It gets very complex very quickly. So while both B and T cells are activated through the MHC antigen system, once activated, they go after tumors in distinct ways. Whereas T cells physically attach to and attack cancer cells, B cells target them indirectly through the production of molecules called antibodies that can bind to tumor antigens. The specific powerful binding of these antibodies can then disrupt critical growth signaling pathways by blocking their surface receptors, as well as mark the cancer cells for destruction by other immune cells. So B cells also have proteins called RAGs, recombination activating genes, that enable them to rearrange the components of antibodies and customize their shapes. With the help of these RAGs, which were first discovered by Susumu Tonegawa, PhD, it's been estimated that B cells have the potential to synthesize over 10 to the 12th 1 trillion, in other words, distinct antibodies. Wow. So unfortunately, abnormal RAG activity, here's the catch, right? Unfortunately, abnormal RAG activity can also cause cancer-promoting mutations in B cells and is believed to contribute to the development of lymphoma. Oh man, that stinks pretty hard. Lymphoma is a terrible cancer and it can be very tough to tackle sometimes. So this connection was discovered by Frederick W. Alt, PhD, and Klaus, I'll try, Rajewski, I cannot pronounce that, MD. Outside of B cells, scientists now also have the ability, thanks in part to Jeffrey V. Ravitch, MD, PhD to produce synthetic customized antibodies for cancer immunotherapy. Over a dozen of these have already been approved by the FDA for many diverse cancer types. Examples include anti-CD20 antibodies for leukemia and lymphoma and anti-HER antibodies for breast cancer. So they are tackling some pretty hard to tackle things here with these immunotherapies, and that's really great news. Hopefully it continues to improve. So the following CRI funded scientists are working to better understand the factors that govern B cell activity and antibody production, with a focus on developing strategies to prevent and or treat cancer in the clinic. So again, really hoping this stuff is so new, hoping that it continues to get better, that they can tackle the more difficult forms of cancer or in cancers out there with these immunotherapies in the coming years. There was talk of curing all cancer. There's another article that came out recently, and I think I'll do a completely separate video on that one. But for now, thank you all so much. Again, please make sure to subscribe to Radical Science News on, I guess Facebook too, but definitely most importantly on our YouTube channel, because I will be moving this over there eventually. And also, if you want to donate or chip in a little bit for my work, you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi.com. So, or I think it's a .com, but I'll leave the link in the description below. So that's how you can help by contributing to my channel, or of course, sharing this with people who are interested in these topics. Again, thank you so much, everybody, and thank you for following Art, Science, Wonder.